From Open Source Intelligence Michigan with Rick Killops. Do-it-yourself outside surveillance cameras that are inexpensive and easy to use and deploy. If you have a large company, a company with unlimited resources, then this video is probably not for you. However, if these are your partners, and you normally work, then we may have some useful ideas for you.
Working at surveillance by yourself can be very challenging, especially if you have more exits to cover than you can do by yourself. And in this example, let's say you have a simple assignment of saying from your client, I want to know if this person leaves the building during the day. Now, you don't just set up on their car because they could leave with someone else. And in this situation, there's a back lot with access to a road out. And then if you set up across the street, you can cover two parts of it, the front and side, but you can't cover the back. So unless you have someone else, you're going to need another way to watch that and to be able to provide the information to your client whether they left or not. Same could be said for setting up in a rural area where you could cover one corner, but you don't know if the target might have gone out in the vehicle another way, and you can't get a direct eye on the house. So you need another way of being able to tell if the person left that day. One way of doing that, of course, is to have a covert camera set up to monitor that back area that you can then review and determine whether or not that person left. This is the first setup that I purchased. It's about $700 worth of equipment here, and I found it to be very complicated. A lot of hookups, a lot of wires had to be hooked up right. Everything had to be fastened correctly. And then you had to aim the camera. You had to fine-tune it. You had to program it. You had to lug all of this as pretty heavy out to the area where you're going to set it up and then hide it. And that all proved to be more difficult to me than what it was worth. And it just didn't work out for me. There are other alternatives, but boy, those all seem to be awful expensive to me. I've always worried about losing them. Plus, I wanted to be able to have multiple units so I could set up maybe 2 or 3 cameras on the same case. So I started to try to think about an alternative way of doing this that would meet this criteria. They would be an inexpensive, programmable, weatherproof, easy setup, and quick deployment with a decent battery life. And what I finally came up with was I started using these little indoor cameras. I had to adapt them for outside use, but they proved to work very well for me. There's all sorts of different ones you can buy, but for example, this one for $70, you could afford to lose it if it came down to it, but it met the criteria that I needed when I adapted it. First of all, it was programmable. You plug it in, it's rechargeable battery, and you program it through your computer. And the settings are all self-explanatory, very simple. The thing I liked about it, too, is that you can set it to go off by sound, you can set it to go off by vibration or by movement, and you can set different value amounts, like how much sound or how much movement to set it off. And the really neat thing was that you could set it on a schedule so that it would stay turned off until a certain time, turn itself on, run during that time, set to your standards like movement or whatever, and turn itself back off. And you could set up a 7-day schedule for that. And I thought that was great. And again, that was easy to do. Here are some examples of what the camera case looked like. Here's some examples. Right here's an example of it deployed and being a hidden camera. Another one here. There's another way you can conceal it just by using camo tape and waterproofing tape, which I'll explain later. Here's an example of me capturing a car coming on an intersection I couldn't cover, but I went back later and was able to verify that the car had gone through that spot. Here's one where I put one camera in a tree across the street, and I set up a second camera on the ground in the little Tupperware container I just shown, and I was able to get 2 views of the parking lot. And so it gave me a better coverage of the lot. Here's one where I couldn't sit on the driveway myself, but the person wanted to know if there was going to be any activity in and out of this driveway during a certain period of time. So I set up a camera on the branch of a tree, and here's what it captured with the motion detection. Now, he didn't at this point care about getting license plates, and this wasn't going to be sharp enough to get those, but it certainly was sharp enough to tell you whether or not there was activity coming in and out of this location. And something else, this camera is not going to give you good night vision. However, it will give you information that you could use in your case to tell you whether something might have happened at night or not. Right here, it's nighttime. You're not going to be able to make this car out, but you certainly can tell, and it's date time-stamped, that a vehicle arrived at a certain time. And this is all just sitting on a branch of a tree that nobody's going to see. In this case, I had to try to watch that doorway there, and there was no place I could set up on. I didn't know what I was going to do, but then I thought of the magnet that I had on my GPS unit. I took the magnet off and I taped one of these cameras to it, and I stuck it on the side of the dumpster that you see there, and that was able to capture the information I needed for the time period I needed. And you'll see the vehicle that I was trying to capture arriving. I'm not going to show all the people because obviously that's confidential, but this is really sharp here. I had to blur it out for confidentiality purposes, but it captures the movement and activity going on right there. Then at night, again, you're not going to get great video, but it shows that this guy came out to the vehicle for some reason at that time, sat in it for a little while. I didn't run the whole thing, but he went back in. And then finally, here it shows the vehicle leaving in the morning. And this is in December. It's very cold. The battery lasted all night, no problem. And again, I just stuck it on the side of the dumpster with a magnet and some tape. In this final example here, I had to monitor this driveway from like 4 in the afternoon till 8 in the morning. And there's no way that the guy had enough money to pay me to set on surveillance that long. And there was no place that I could have sat and had a direct eye anyway, even if I wanted to. If you notice, the snowbanks look very, very hard, and they are. They're icy and hard. It's late in March. What I ended up doing was using white camo tape, waterproofed a camera, put white camo tape on it, and I dug a hole in the snowbank across the street from the driveway, put the camera in there, packed it in with the snow, just leaving the lens open, and I left it overnight, and it captured great video. And actually, I had to blur the license plate out here because it was good enough to capture the license plate. And it ran all night. It was still running in the morning when I pulled it out, even though it was in snow all night. Now comes art and craft time. Here are the materials that I used to make a pretend rock around a tiny little Rubbermaid lunchbox. This box right here. Right there, you'll notice it says Rubbermaid. You want to make sure that the lens is going to be higher than where that Rubbermaid is. I use play foam to hold the camera in place and to hold the lens in the exact spot it needs to be. You put the camera inside the little Rubbermaid box there, and you'll see the lens hole right there. And what I did initially was I would put a wire nut over that area so that when I put the material around, I didn't block the lens hole, and when I painted it, I didn't block the lens hole. As you'll see later, I decided to just fill the whole thing up and then drill a hole later, and I'll explain that. I used Elmer's damaged wood material. It's a resin and a hardener. You have to mix it together, and once it comes out as a consistent color, you then build your rock. And it's simply by taking it and wrapping it around this little Tupperware container. You want to make sure you can get the top off so that's a separate piece there. The top's going to be a separate piece. But you just build that, and you're going to let it dry for 24 hours once you have it all build up as a rock. And believe me, I'm no artist, so I'm sure a lot of you can do a better job than I did. And then after 24 hours, you can then paint it to the color of a rock that you want it to match. I'm going to put some stretchy tape into the hole there, area there, to protect it so that I don't get paint on the lens part. So now that it's painted up, you put your camera in, and you can either just leave it like that if it matches, okay, or you can do further to camouflage it. Here's an example of it put out with other rocks. It just kind of fits in with no problem. However, there's another way. You can go to the dollar store, get a bunch of these fake leaves, and then using a glue gun, set it up to make it further camouflaged. And I usually do that. It fits in really well, and with whatever area you can use different types of fake leaves. Here's how it looks when it's done, and here is an example of it put out in the field. Very hard to see. I decided now it's easier to just build the whole rock, paint it, don't worry about the lens hole cover, then drill that, and then find a thin, hard, clear piece of plastic to glue inside of there, rather than screw around with that wire nut and whatnot. And I used stiff plastic from a phone screen protector. Now here's another way to use the black box without the Rubbermaid container, simply by waterproofing it and then adding some camouflage to it.
Okay, in order to waterproof it, I use this repair tape, which is a silicone self-bonding wrap. It only sticks to itself, so it won't stick and wreck any of your equipment, but it's waterproof. You can get it at Walmart, any place, really. And this stuff stretches also. You also want to make sure that the USB port is covered up. So you just begin at one end and stretch it tight and just keep wrapping it around. Now when I get up to this part here, I'm going to want to turn it on, and I'll explain this later, but this switch here, if it's depressed, can turn it off also. So it's turned on, and you want to check that by checking that light there. So you know it's turned on, and in order to ensure that that doesn't get turned off by pressure, what I do is then I just take a paper clip and put it over this and then wrap it, because then that paper clip will prevent the pressure from going down. There, now it's all sealed in. This might stand out if you have it on a tree or whatever. So in order to camouflage, I use this stuff. Camoform self-cling camouflage wrap. It only sticks to itself again, so you don't get any of your equipment ruined. Now I'll put a piece on this end, and then two pieces over here. We've got to make sure that that is open. Now what I also do, because this is on now and it might be running whenever it sees motion, unless it's set to turn on at a later time, which is what I normally would do, is I'll take a little piece and just cover it until I get out in the field and have it deployed. Then I take it off. You have to make sure you know which way is up and down though, because once you get it all like this, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. And when you go back to video or to review your video, you find out you did everything upside down, which can be corrected with editing, but still. I use this stem wire. I think we got this at Joann Fabrics or something. Just a green wire. Generally I'll take two and put one up towards the front, and then I can use that to hook onto a branch or whatnot, but you generally have to have two in order to keep it at a level spot. And
if any of you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to contact me by email or by phone. Thanks.